Got it. Got it. Participants, mute all. Mute all. Close. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. When the Jewish people left Egypt and were in the desert of Sinai for 40 years, to a certain extent, they were hermetically sealed from the rest of society. Their only experiences that the Torah records for us, excuse me, was a war with Amalek, and because of that, it was unlikely that the Jewish people would ever become followers of Amalek, because Amalek attacks them for no reason. And then they have the experience of Bilam, which leads to the daughters of Moab and of Midian, that they are corrupted by them. And there is a plague that kills thousands. And then they have the wars against Sichon and Og to conquer territory in Ever Hayarden. But generally speaking, they are not exposed to other cultures and to other beliefs and to other societal pressures. They're living in a bubble. That is the story of Klal Yisrael in the desert. Moshe describes it. They are fed miraculously. They have water miraculously. Their clothes don't wear out. So they're in a special set of circumstances. And the Meforshim point out that this had its drawbacks, because, for instance, the Meraglim, the spies, dissuaded that generation from wanting to go to Eretz Israel and to living, quote, a normal life, unquote, because the people were so satisfied with the abnormal life. You don't have to go to work. You don't have to cook supper. You have time all day to hear classes from Moshe and Yoshua and Aaron. It's a very special existence. And therefore, people become accustomed to exceptional circumstances. We're witness to that. If I would have told you a number of years ago that you have to sit in a mask, or you have to sit separate, or you wouldn't accept it. Today it's normal. And our experts tell us that we may have to sit with masks for the rest of our lives. So then that will become the normal. So Moshe Rabbeinu now, at the end of his life, when he realizes, as the Lord has informed him, so to speak, that the normal of the desert will no longer be the normal, that the Jewish people now are going to go into Eretz Israel. Eretz Israel is dependent upon other things. It has to have rain. And we have no record whatsoever if there ever was any rain in the desert. They didn't need rain. But in Eretz Yisrael, you need rain. You need snow on the Hermon. You need that there be streams that feed the Jordan, that feed the Sea of Galilee. And in Eretz Yisrael, they have to work. They will have to plant and sow and reap and harvest. It's a whole new situation. So that's one area that Moshe has to deal with. We have to have a general picture of what Moshe's speech here is. Moshe's speech is to shift the normalcy, to take what almost had been forgotten. Now, normalcy is a relative thing. The Jewish people, portions of them will say, whenever there are problems, Nitna Rosh v'Noshuva Mitzrayim. Let's go back to Egypt. That was normal. It's normal for us to be slaves. Leave us alone, Moshe. And Avdos Mitzrayim, that we're willing to work for the Egyptians. That's our normal state of affairs. So we see from here that normalcy is shifting. It's not an absolute. What is normal in one time is not normal at another time. And what is normal for one nation that doesn't itself apply to another nation. So Moshe is aware of that. He wants to shift them, shift their thinking. So Chazal say the first accomplishment was that it's a different generation. It's a generation that no longer remembered Egypt. Because it no longer remembered Egypt, the normalcy of Egypt declined. It was not valid anymore because no one remembered it. No one knew it. Now, we always attempt to perpetuate what was in the past. Eastern Europe is a good example of that. So we have created, for our time, when Eastern Europe is no longer present for us in the main for 75 years already. So we create a fanciful Eastern Europe. It's not realistic. It's not what was. But we're comforted by what we created. And we created it to justify what we are doing now. This is both in the religious world, so to speak, where we have rewritten the life of our ancestors in Eastern Europe to make them politically correct today. And it's true amongst Jews that are not observant, who've also rewritten their history. And Moshe is aware of all of this. That's the importance of his speech. That's why for these 6 months, Moshe is going to talk to them. Because of the fact that he wants to set the record straight. So Moshe destroys the myth of Egypt. Moshe destroys the myth of Amalek. Moshe destroys Sichon and Og. Moshe destroys, so to speak, the outside enemies and outside forces that could affect the Jewish people. But Moshe is aware that there is a greater enemy. And the greater enemy is the internal enemy. Greater enemy lurks within the Jewish people themselves. And that is what he addresses in this week's Parsha and last week's Parsha. And he sets up people for us, situations. Last night, between Mincha and Maariv, I spoke about Moshes and Mediach. Moshes and Mediach are people within the Jewish people who propagandize against the Jewish people, who propagandize against the God of Israel, the religion of Israel, the tradition of Israel. And unfortunately, there are many of them that exist today. The greatest enemies of the state of Israel lie within the Jewish people themselves. A factor that, if we thought about it, should give us great pause as to why that should be. I mean, what's the problem with George Soros and with all the other ones? Well, what's the burr under the saddle here? So it says in the Torah, Ki yisischa achicha ben avicha o ben imecha. The one that's the Macy's, the one that propagandizes against, he's a close relative of yours. He's your brother. He's your mother's son or your father's son. Not a stranger. He's from within you. And he'll be the one that will say, Neilcha v'navdov, Elohim acherim asher lo yadatem. We want to go and worship gods, new gods, asher lo yadatem. It's all new. Nothing ever happened before. But we have the answer. In the modern society that we live in, behaves as though Rome never fell, a Roman civilization never destroyed itself, or that socialism somehow worked. It's almost a blind faith. It's a much more of a faith than people who believe in religion. So Moshe says that's where the problem is going to come. It's going to come from your brother, your mother's son. You're raised together. Maybe even went to Cheder together. You went to the yeshiva together. And for some reason, and there always is a reason, he becomes a Maci. It's not only that he does not accept the Torah and its values, he doesn't want you to accept it anymore. Many times because he feels that he was mistreated. But that all in all in life, those excuses never really hold water. Life is not kind to any of us. Challenge. So Moshe says there's a Maci and a Mediach, and it's from you. And you have to be aware. You have to know what's going to happen. So on one hand, you should not feel that it's a failure of Torah society, so to speak, because a Maci and Mediach exists. And you'll say, well, if we had a perfect system of education, everybody would turn out to be Rabbi Wein. That's foolish to say. No perfect system. And therefore, these situations occur. Now, Moshe warned us about another type of person. There's a person that's a false prophet. That's a Novi. Chazal tell us that he has established his credentials as being a prophet. We have in Tanakh, for instance, the Novi Ido, who was a legitimate prophet. And then for some personal reason, he becomes a false prophet. He assigns to himself the powers of prophecy that were not granted to him. And false prophets always have an audience. They're always popular. It's part of the genre. It goes with them. Not only that, the Torah says that the test for prophecy, so to speak, is whether or not what is prophesied actually is going to occur. So most false prophets, where it says, person that wants to be false, so he makes predictions what's going to be 100 years from now. Well, 100 years from now, nobody now can say that he's wrong, that we don't know. Right? The world is going to end in 10 years, 8 years, 20 years, 40 years. So therefore, I shouldn't drive a car today. But no one points out that they said that 20 years ago and we're still there, or 30 years ago. So the test of a false prophet, the Torah itself establishes it, is whether or not the prophecy is valid. And then the Torah throws in a kicker, a real problem that all the Meforshim echo. The Gemara says, even if what this prophet says will occur, actually does occur, he can still be a false prophet. Because a prophet does not have the power to establish values or observances or behavior that is contrary to Torah law. No prophet has that power. So we can be Merlin the magician. You can make all the miracles that you want. Doesn't mean anything. If somehow what he says contradicts the Jewish values, and to a great extent, even Jewish tradition. Now, we have long experience with false prophets. That's why Moshe warns us about them. Every generation has its own false prophets. And there are people that make a living prophesying. Your financial advisor. So when the market is going up, he's a genius, and the market's going down, well, it's not his fault. The truth of the matter is that none of it is predictable. But the nature of people is that they want predictions. We want to know what's going to happen. We want that the experts should tell us. So even when it's apparent that the emperor is naked, that the experts don't know what they're talking about, we still believe in them. Because having a false prophet is still better than having no prophet at all. And we see that throughout Jewish history, the damage that false prophets have done. From the earliest rise of Christianity through Shabtai Tzvi, through Yaakov Frank, through all of the false prophets of the 19th century. Well, the Gemara says that the fate of a liar is that eventually he believes his lies. The fate of the false prophet is that eventually he believes it too. And that only comes to destroy not just his credibility, but to destroy the whole system itself. So there's another Chole Machalom that the Torah describes, someone that has dreams, someone that foretells the future. And not only that, it looks like he's right. Whatever prophecy he made actually occurs. Just heard today an interesting fact. There's a woman who is in charge of the YouTube channel of Google, which is a tremendously powerful media tool. And she has undertaken now to censor on YouTube anything that doesn't meet her own ideas or beliefs. So that if you want to be on YouTube, like this great shiur is going to be on YouTube, she has to like the shiur. I think her first name is Susan. So what are her qualifications? The answer is that 23 years ago, she rented her garage to the two young men who created Google. And since they couldn't pay rent, they gave her shares in the company. So she's worth $500 million today. And she heads YouTube without any qualifications. But she's the one that's going to tell you what you can see and what you can't see. What can be on the channel and what cannot be on the channel. And not only that, now she believes that she is an expert. That's the false prophet. That's the Novi Sheker that exists. And therefore, in time of Bayis Rishon, when Nevuah, when Chazon was Nifratz B'Klal Yisrael, prophets abounded. There was a level of spirituality and prophecy. So a lot of people assumed that they had that too. And they were self-proclaimed prophets. We read that in the Novi Yirmiyah. If you read Tanakh, I mean, Tanakh is not past events, it's current events. Yeah, the Novi decries, in anguish. The false prophets say everything's going to be all right. Yirmiyah says the Churban is coming. So who do you expect the people to listen to? Who do they want to listen to? Somebody's running for office. He's going to tell you, I have no solutions. Nothing. The other one says, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, everybody's going to everybody's going to benefit. So who are the people going to listen to? We naturally know human nature. And we find that in Tanakh, that when Shlomo HaMelech died, so there was a contest as to who should succeed him. And his son Rechavam. Now Rechavam made the political mistake of telling them the truth. My father whipped you with leather and I will whip you with scorpions. Meaning hard times are coming. Because Yerovam is breaking off from the Malchus Yehuda and is going to create Malchus Yisrael. So hard times are coming, but nobody wants to hear that. And therefore, the Novi Sheker always says good news. Always provides that type of, and that explains, not explains, but I think gives us at least an insight why Moshe's speech ends in such tragic terms. We're going to Parshat Kitovo, we're going to hear the Tochacha. You're going to hear over 90 curses, terrible things that are going to happen to you. Everything that Moshe said happened. We have a film of it. Why did he tell him that? Gemara says, "Dial Tzara b'shato," Rabbanu Shalom said. It's enough when it happens. Don't have to. But Moshe wants to point out that he's not an Ovi Sheker. He's not going to tell you good news when it's not there. He's not going to give you false ambitions. He's going to deal with reality. And therefore, that is what makes his speech so vital. That's why the Chumash Dvarim is so powerful and meaningful. Because it is the antithesis to the Novi Sheker. It's completely the opposite. All of us want to know the truth. And the real truth in life is that people can handle the truth. But because of the fact of the appeal of the Maci and Mediach and the Novi Sheker, that very few people get to the truth, get to see the picture accurately. And therefore, that is what Moshe is trying to accomplish here. And we should be able, therefore, to see ourselves in the mirror of Moshe's words and the ideas that he expresses, because that ultimately brings us to greater heights of belief and spirituality. So I want to wish you all a very good Shabbos. Thank you for coming. And stay well. You'll be happy to know I had the third shot yesterday.
There's no worse than the second. The 8%. No worse than the second.
That's okay.
Right.
Your arm hurts a little.